Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video, and we pick from those each week. I think there's something like 24, 25 actually from this past week. So I appreciate everyone's participation. You guys come up with great questions every week, or slight twist on other questions that are helpful to expand on an idea or thought or whatever. So thank you very much for that. Before I jump into some questions, again, we're 2 weeks away, or 2 more weeks of the $50 off the weekly garden planner and $50 off the Learn to Garden video series. The Learn to Garden video series, we put up the 3rd design video from Steph this past week. I'm actually putting up another video on the Learn to Garden video series on how healthy soil can help prevent insect related issues in the garden. And that's a talk I'm going to be giving this next year. So I'm including some of the thoughts from that talk in a video on the Learn to Garden video series. Again, it's $50 off with the code Learn to Garden. And then the weekly garden planner, we're shooting January and February right now. So those 2 months, those are the last 2 months to complete the whole year on the weekly garden planner. Holly is out here with me. I don't know if you can see her back here. That was one of the questions actually coming up. She's slowing down big time. She'll be 16 next month. Let's see, what else? And the t-shirts are 10% off for the rest of the month as well. So all of those things are available over on the horttube.com website. I forgot to say thanks to somebody named Elizabeth who had sent us a Thanksgiving card. I forgot to say thank you for that. We framed a couple of the things that were given to us over the last year. A few more things that we need to frame. You guys were so generous. A lot of folks were generous. The open house brought us gifts and paintings, and we've gotten things through the mail, and all of those things are greatly appreciated. And we have some things we're in the process of hanging inside. So thank you guys for all of those things. They're very, very generous. Okay, we're gonna jump into some questions from last week, and Holly's gonna walk that way out of the camera, apparently. Okay, what is the best practice for removing weeds? Decapitate, pull out, will they regenerate from the roots if you don't get them all? And what tool did I use to decapitate the weeds in that video where I was showing the winter weeds from last week? That tool is called a shuffle hoe, or the thing goes by a bunch of different names, but shuffle hoe, I can't remember some of the other names for it right this minute as I'm sitting here, trying to think about it. But so I decapitated those small winter weeds when they were still small in the vegetable garden over there, which was some chickweed and henbit, and it'll do fine, with small annual weeds like that while they're still very small. Just taking that hoe and decapitating them. If they're well-established weeds, decapitating them isn't going to work. If it's Bermuda grass, it's not going to work. If it's nutsedge, it's not going to work. If it's something that's got a deep tap root on it, it's not necessarily going to work to just decapitate them and move on. But, so that, it's weed to weed dependent. Bermuda grass, you're probably going to have to spray it. Nutsedge, in order to fully get rid of nutsedge at some point, you may need to spray it. The other weeds, just, decapitate. Some weeds, as they're germinating, you can decapitate them pretty quickly, put a covering of mulch over top of it, and those weeds are gone. It also depends, a lot of times, probably on the conditions outside when you do it. If you go outside on a 95-degree sunny day and you decapitate a weed, it may be dead. But if you go out on a 65-degree day and the soil's moist, it might be resilient through that. And so a lot of it may depend on the conditions, how dry it is, how wet it is, whatever, as to whether or not a weed's going to die just simply by taking its head off, right? But and again, definitely by weed, different weeds. Bermuda grass, there's no way you're going to decapitate it and have it all die. It's going to come right back from that because it's just got those underground rhizomes that it can come back from. Nutsedge does a similar thing. So it's a weed to weed thing, and I was just really covering some of these basic winter weeds, getting them killed while they're still small. course, I had 14 people talk about eating all of these weeds, so you're welcome to leave them and eat them if you want to eat them. But I don't want them taking over my vegetable garden between now and the spring. So I can decapitate them and get away. I can kill 99% of them, decapitating them while they're still very small. If I tried that in February when they're exploding in growth, it probably won't be as effective. So a lot of thought to go into that, whether or not you can decapitate a weed and kill it. It's going to depend on the weed, how small it is, how big it is, how hot it is, how dry it is, all of those things. Okay. And then somebody said, what about getting rid of Bermuda grass in that same video? And I think I kind of answered this last week. You really kind of need to spray Bermuda grass to actually kill it. I mean, I've buried Bermuda grass in clear plastic for a week or two before and had the sun just, I mean, it was probably, I don't know how hot it was under that clear plastic, and pulled it off. And all I had managed to do was take care of all the competition for the Bermuda grass. I killed everything except for the Bermuda grass. Now the Bermuda grass was just free to take the thing, the space over. It was not effective. I imagine there is a length of time where it would have been effective, but it's really hard to get rid of. Okay, what is Griffin's breed? Griffin, other dog, was in the video about amaryllis and sat there watching me talk about amaryllis. Griffin is a lot of different things, but he's 25. We did get his DNA checked, and he is 25% pug, and then he's 12.5% Basset Hound, Shih Tzu, Black Lab, and Chow, and then 25% of a lot of other things together. So Griffin is everything. He's truly a mixture of every kind of dog. I don't know how this happened, but he's everything. Let's see. And he's a very sweet dog. He's a little bit of a nervous Nelly when we're out walking. He'll bark at the occasional person walking by. He actually just wants to get to know them, but he's weirdly, so we've got a few training things, and he's a flight risk. I've never had a dog that was an actual flight risk. Like, I got to leave you see her, she's now walked past again, going this way. She ain't going anywhere. I've never had every dog I've ever had wasn't going anywhere. And Griffin is just like, whew, I'm gonna go meet everyone right now. Anyway, okay, so somebody said their daffodils are sprouting. What can be done? Really nothing. My daffodils are up. They were in a video on Friday. The 5-minute Friday video, which is 16 minutes long. I showed our daffodils coming up in the garden. There's just nothing we can do about it. It's pretty much a yearly occurrence now that the daffodils come up. They get a little bit of cold and it gets really warm nights, and they start to come up, and then they go, oh no, I'm up. And it's really, really cold. And so it's gonna sting the top of them, and then they're gonna come up and flower, but unfortunately they're gonna have a little brown on the foliage, you know, when they're flowering in February or March. So somebody asked from the amaryllis video, after the holiday amaryllis, when do you plant them outside? Definitely spring, after the last frost is when you'd want to move them, transition them to outside. And people in zones like 8 to 10, certainly 8B to 10, can just leave them or 11 can just leave them in the ground if they want to. Or anybody can put them in the ground after their kind of frost-free date, and then dig them up later and bring them back into the house later. Now, the information's in that video, but definitely after last frost, or your average last frost. So this person's in the deep south, zone 8B, with a heat zone 9. Noticed different resources list different zones on tags and sites. What's the most reliable or accurate site for info? I do like the North Carolina State website and the Missouri Botanic Garden website. Usually have pretty good information on zones on their websites, but it is truly all over the place. If before I shoot one of these single plant videos, a lot of times I'll go, oh, let me just make sure my information in my mind is right. I've been doing this for 40 years, but I do occasionally, I'll open Monrovia's website or Missouri Botanic Gardens website or Southern Living Plant Collection or whatever. I guarantee you on virtually every plant, I can find a difference in what 5 to 9 or 6 to 9 or 7 to 10 versus 7 to 9. You'll see that all over the place. And some of that is, so some of it is just plants haven't been tried everywhere necessarily, and it may be up to you in your zone 9 area to find out if it will actually grow. But there's also differences within the zones, big time differences within the zones. So zone 9 in, Portland is very different than zone 9 in Texas in terms of heat during the summertime. So you may have, the horticultural zone map is just about average low temperature. So you have the same average low temperature maybe in Austin, Texas as you have in Portland, Oregon. I have no idea how close they are together. I'm just throwing out 2 random cities right now. But during the summertime, it may be 20 degrees warmer in that, in Austin, Texas than it is in Portland. And so that heat is going to have an issue. So I might say it grows in my zone 9 Portland garden. That doesn't mean it grows in your zone 9 Austin, Texas garden. So that can be an issue too. So don't necessarily look at it as, it may be that nursery that's selling that plant from that area of the country knows it grows in their zone 9 area or their zone whatever area, but it doesn't in somebody else's. And so that can be part of the issue as well. It's just like, that's one of the things I've been doing this for 39 years. The first 30 years of it, I was mostly stationary here in the Raleigh and Johnston County area, of my own state. And this past year, I probably traveled 5.5 months out of the year. And so now I have a much different view, over these last few years. You guys have allowed me to go to the Missouri Botanic Garden and the Norfolk Botanic Garden and New York City and wherever else to film, these videos. So I appreciate that. But also at the same time, I come away going, seeing how things perform in different areas of the country. I'm way more knowledgeable about that over the last 3 or 4 years than I was in the first, 2 or 3 years of this channel, by far. I mean, it's not even, that part of my knowledge isn't even close. So I may not know necessarily a lot of the fundamentals of growing the plants and how to, all the soil stuff, all the soil science, all of those things haven't really changed. But now I can kind of go, hey, I've seen that plant growing in Portland, or I've seen that plant growing in San Francisco, or I've seen that plant growing in Dallas, and that's been helpful to me in making these single plant videos going forward versus the ones I originally made at my nursery from just being a nurseryman. I don't even know where I was going with all that. But anyway, some of the differences can just be regional and weren't done with intent in any way. And then sometimes people are just guessing because the plant's so new. That's a thing too. Can you address frost damage both during and after? They've got a big leaf hydrangea that has fried buds on it. That video from Friday is all about cold damage in the garden. And the answer, unfortunately, I made a video showing off some cold damage and then said there's nothing you can do about it. Unless you have something that's really, you think will take additional damage going forward in the winter, that you might cover, the rest of the winter, when it's going to be abnormally cold the rest of the winter. But everything else is a wait and see. And if it has damage on it, that damaged foliage is likely protecting the rest of that plant. And this was an ugly change of temperature this year, and I pointed out in that video on Friday that a lot of the native plants were not fooled by this. I mean, they just weren't fooled. There's a viburnum nudum behind the camera. I have a leaf on it, perfectly fine, went dormant just like it's supposed to go. And then there's other things in the garden out here. Another hydrangea back here that's just every leaf is still on it and it just got fried on it. It just weren't, the plants that weren't from here weren't prepared to go from 60-degree nights to 22-degree nights that quickly. And most of the damage, though, I think will be minor. And a lot of it's the age of the plant. So if a plant's 3-4 years old, it's going to be able to take it'll be able to take a lot of damage without killing it. If something's newly planted like 6 weeks ago and then has one of those types of events, that can kill it. Holly, what are you doing? Okay, let's see. Number 8, would you use a cold frame for vegetable production or for preserving cuttings through winter? Yeah, I talked about last week, we took out what was going to be our cold frame greenhouse, whatever it was going to be, back here in the corner. But, having a small structure in the garden, if you're a person you think you're going to try to be producing more plants, taking cuttings on some of these plants, that you want to extend a season extender you want some place to store your marginal containers on cold nights during the winter, then some sort of small structure like that might be for you. I built a few different versions of that on the channel in the early days of the channel, and it's under a playlist called Propagation, if you want to go and look at any of those videos. Let's see. Will we have a water feature and seeding in our new garden? And so I don't know if that's in Wallace, where we're talking about the new garden. In Wallace, I doubt I would put something in like a water feature that would require either electric being run up there or any kind of ongoing maintenance, because we're not there to see it. Here, I have talked about putting a seeding wall around the new patio that was built this past year and put some sort of noise-making water feature as part of the seeding wall. And so that project, I think that's definitely going to happen. I talked about it originally. It's been in my mind. I built a similar seeding wall as a landscaper years ago. And so I've got an idea of how I want that to look. So yes, at some point, I'll probably be including a water feature in here. But I think we're going to do a little bit more remodeling of the house ahead of some of the bigger projects like that out in the garden this next year. Okay. Can the height of an emerald arborvitae be reduced? It's growing above a rooftop. Is it doable by pruning? Yeah, well, that would be the way to do it. Yeah, and we were up in Canada and upstate New York, where Thuja occidentalis is native to, which is the what that plant is, and it's native to the Northeast United States up into Canada. And everybody has them sheared off at the top. So yeah, you can absolutely shear them and cut them. And we saw them cut into all kinds of boxes and frames and triangles and every kind of way that you could cut them. It will create multiple trunks, and it will probably shorten the life of the plant, but it's gonna not. Are you just gonna let it keep growing above your roof and cause a problem? No. So just go ahead and I would cut it. But I wait till late winter, early spring. Don't do it in the summertime, because if you cut it in the summertime, I think it would burn, down inside the plant. So I think there's a sweet spot toward the end of winter when you would cut on it. But yeah, we saw them up there treated like boxwoods, basically, 6 to 8 foot tall boxwoods, but treated similar and shearing them. Let's see. What is the Mahonia you featured in last week's Q&A? That's why I came back over here. It's Marvel Mahonia, and it's blooming now. It's got lots more flowers coming on it. This one's zone 6 hardy too, so that's kind of nice. Then I got the question of, Holly hasn't been in many videos. How is she doing? A lot of the videos I've been putting up are just those single plant videos from the old channel and some new ones, and she's not necessarily in those little short videos, but typically I'll have her out here if I'm shooting one of the, come here. She happens to be walking by as I'm talking about her. There we go, baby. But she's doing as fine as a almost 16-year-old dog is going to do. She's lost a lot of body weight, and we are feeding her like crazy. This dog is eating more Thanksgiving food than anybody watching this video right now. We made a second turkey, basically, and because they were half price after Thanksgiving, and she's gotten half of that turkey. We've just been putting in her food just to keep her motivated to eat. And so I've never put more calories in that dog than I'm putting in right now, and she's still losing weight a little bit. So it is what it is. She's almost 16. But she's living her best life out here, as she always has. Let's see. Somebody has 2 Chicago hardy figs in basement for the winter. Was told not to water once dormant, but they are very dry. Yeah, you need to water them a little bit. So, there's definitely a delicate balance between allowing something just to, the roots just to dry up and be gone. So I would water. Again, I talked about watering in last week's video, and all this water discussion. Really, if something is very, very dry, water it. And then again, let it dry down again though. That's the main thing, is not to repeatedly water it. It's just to water it when it needs it and then let it dry down. That's the thing. Make sure the drain holes are working so that the water comes out of the bottom of it and it's not sitting in any water. Then somebody had said, and this is not really a question, thank you for your thoughtful and being non-judgmental and being patient with question repeats. shows professionalism and purpose in education. Much appreciated. Thank you guys. Thank you for pointing that out. I mean, I've been peppered with gardening questions for 30 some years. And, you know, I understand that the world we live in now, people are just, they didn't grow up on farms. You know, there was 2 generations ago, most people knew, you know, how, you know, agriculture in some way that would allow them to then jump over to horticulture and, you know, plant plants, have faith in it, that things are going to work out. And if it didn't, you know, I mean, life and death on a farm is a normal thing. There are a lot of folks that are really scared to kill things, you know, I mean, you know, killing plants and whatever, you know, they just don't want to, they don't want to do it wrong. Of course, it costs a lot of money. You know, to do, you know, these, you know, plants that are not getting less expensive over time. So I understood pretty early on that a lot of folks are coming from not a lot of information was given to them, you know, in high school and in college and their life in a suburb or city or wherever they grew up. So I don't mind at all, you know, answering the same questions, you know, repeatedly. This doesn't matter because everybody has a starting point, you know, where they're coming from. Everybody watching this video right now has a different set of knowledge. Some people are in horticulture. Some people have long histories in horticulture. Some people watching and work in garden centers. Some people watching, you know, are just trying to figure out how to get started in a garden and not kill something. Spoiler alert, you're going to kill a few things, and those are the things you're going to learn from. But anyway, I thank you for pointing that out because that's my ultimate goal, is to just be able to, you know, I sit for years at the farmer's market in Raleigh getting the same question over and over and over, 8 hours a day, basically. And a lot of it, so much of it is kind of fear-based. Just not wanting to kill something. They want just the right thing for the right spot, the right solution, and they're scared of damaging it in some way, or, you know, either wasting money, wasting their time, or literally a fear of killing something. And so, but no, I've got all the patience in the world for this. So, and I enjoy answering the questions. Really, my favorite part of any presentation or anything is just get me to the Q&A part because that's where I'm actually comfortable. Okay, recommendations for ridding Creeping Charlie and blackberries that have migrated from neighbor. This is a really tough one, and it said in there that they had asked the neighbor if they could spray over into their garden a bit, and the neighbor said no. This is a really tough one. Neighboring weeds are not fun. My neighbor over here has some Creeping Charlie, and then there's some Creeping Charlie on the city's property on this other side. It's not fun to have someone else's weeds migrating over into your garden, and unfortunately that's, you know, it's not your land, and so you're the best thing to do, I think, is to build some sort of barrier that's between you and them. That barrier could just be 2 feet of mulch before you plant your plants that will allow you to spray through there, or use the shuffle hoe, or however you want to kill them. It could be some sort of stone path, you know, that goes along the border that separates that space, you know, those 2 spaces. But you need to create some sort of border on your side that allows it to stop. It could be a treated 2x6 timber, you know, on its side, you know, along the property line, just as a barrier to keep that, you know, any of those creeping weeds from creeping in. But just some sort of clever approach that allows you to maintain it without having your plants up in it. You know, shade helps hurt a lot of these things too. So, you know, if you can, you know, put a tree along that line, you know, that ultimately shades it out on their side and your side, you know, that's a possibility too. That's a kind of a semi-aggressive approach, right? that would work on it as well. But anyway, that's it is problematic to have someone else's English ivy or something like that coming over to your property. So I've got English ivy attack from this property behind us, and Creeping Charlie from 2 sides. So I feel your pain on this. I've basically left a barrier that's defendable between me and it. Okay, somebody has a 6-foot tall Bracken's Brown Beauty. It had the leader broke out of it. Bracken's Brown Beauty Magnolia, so a Southern Magnolia, evergreen Magnolia. The leader broke out of it, and now it has two kind of parallel or Y-shaped leaders coming out of it. Should they cut one? Yeah, I would definitely cut one off. And just figure out, before you cut one or decide on one, figure out which one you could pull straight up and stake for a little while. One of them is going to be the more likely, the better leader of the two. Once you figure that out, cut the one off and stake it straight. Maybe again, doing this in March, you know, maybe the best time to do it. But just get out there and figure out which one of them is going to be the easiest one to stake straight and have the tree look halfway decent going forward. This person is working on ridding wisteria and ivy infestation. It's 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch into 1.5 inch in diameter. So big material. Would I recommend painting the ends with glyphosate? So they're cutting the stems off. Should they paint at the end with glyphosate? Glyphosate works. So glyphosate are originally sold as Roundup. Roundup is no longer glyphosate. So don't get confused and go buy Roundup, because it's not glyphosate anymore. It's the other chemicals. They're using the trademark name to putting other chemicals in it, and they've basically abandoned glyphosate. But you can still get glyphosate as like glycol or gly something in the name, usually at farm supply stores and that kind of thing. With all that said, it doesn't really work on wood very well. So the way glyphosate works is it basically starves the plant through its green foliage typically, or through its foliage from feeding itself, and then it dies over time. That's why it always took Roundup. Back when Roundup was just glyphosate, it would take a couple weeks for a weed to die when you were spraying it. And it was really just starving it, is what it was doing. It's just kind of a salt derivative that starves it of being able to feed itself. With that said, if I cut this Mahonia down to the base and just leave the wood down there, it doesn't have anything to spray, really. It doesn't work on the wood the same way it works on the leaves. And so if you're cutting the vines off and leaving the wood, you need to get a brush killer. And yes, you can just paint the brush killer on the ends of the stem. So you're on to the right thing. You just need to use a brush killer rather than a Roundup. I've talked about chemicals more in this video than I ever talk about. And so, but that is the best way to get rid of some of those woody, vining weeds like that, is to cut them off at the base and then carefully with, you know, paint. Keep in mind, if you handle that poison ivy with gloves, that oil or your pants or anything that oil gets on, even if it doesn't end up on your skin, those gloves, it can stay on them for years. You can go back and handle those gloves later and still get the poison ivy from it. So keep in mind, anything that contacts that stuff, you need to wash it in a washing machine or throw it away. Okay, that was number 18. We're flying through this thing. I think I spent 10 minutes on the first question and then we got moving. Okay. Okay, somebody needs something, a fast-growing thing to mask cigarette smoke from a neighbor. My neighbor over here smokes as well outside, and unfortunately the wind blows this direction. They were talking about a dogwood. Well, a dogwood's going to go dormant in the wintertime. Most, you know, our native dogwoods are going to lose their leaves in the winter, so I don't know that's. I would try to find some leafy evergreen things that you can screen across, hollies, and, you know, for me it's osmanthus. I don't know where this person is in terms of zone. Oh, they're in zone 7. So most of the larger growing leafy evergreen things like hollies or even this Mahonia or something like that will create a screen. It will not stop that cigarette smoke. I still know when he's smoking over there, but at least I don't have to, I'm not watching it, you know. But again, I don't think it's going to stop the smoke from coming over, but it will create a barrier that you don't have to, you know, and you don't have to greet them every time they walk out the door. So somebody asked what the difference between a frost protection blanket and any old blanket or quilt. Do I need to buy a special blanket for use for covering their plants? So a frost protection blanket is typically some sort of light cotton, white material, so it reflects light. So there's a couple things you're getting from, you know, we used a white cotton blanket and to cover the plants. It reflects the light back up, so it doesn't gain heat underneath it. That's one thing that we didn't want to do when we covered the plants in the wintertime, was have it actually heat up under them, heat up under the blankets, because that might wake the plants up, you know, and if they're 65 degrees under the blanket and it's 35 outside, that would not be a good combination. So that's the reason we use that white material. So if you Google frost protection blanket or go to Amazon or buy it or whatever, typically what you're gonna see is some sort of white cloth. And we used a big white cotton cloth, big giant ones, I mean 300 feet long and 20 feet wide kind of things, that were pretty thick. Your other blankets and sheets and stuff from the house, I would use those more temporary on things. If you need them, use them. And then we have a whole stack of towels and sheets and bed cases, and they're more for my night to night covering on things. They tend to have a little more weight on them. They can also heat the things up under them if they're darker colors and that kind of thing. But if you have ongoing things that need to be covered, you're pushing the boundaries on plants, or you have a small nursery that you've kind of collected plants in that you haven't figured out where you're planting them in the landscape or whatever, I would invest in an actual frost protection blanket that's this adequate size for what you need. And you need to buy it much bigger than the space that you're trying to cover, so that you can pin it down in the corner. So it has at least a couple feet on all sides, so that you can put some weight on it to keep it from blowing around. And now some people have gone to using a shade cloth. This has become a pretty big practice in the nursery business. It's not real practical for homeowners, but they're using a shade cloth, which is black, but the shade cloth, it's like a greenhouse shade cloth, so it's a 50% shade cloth. So it's still not building heat under it, because the air is able to move through it. But what they're doing is these are super light materials, so they're really easy to cover the plants. And then in the evening, as the temperature is going down to 32 or 30, they're actually turning on their irrigation and icing over the top of it, so they could create a seal at night that melts during the day. That's a pretty good technique. Again, it's not something a homeowner is typically going to do. So I get a white frost protection blanket. Great for extending the season in your vegetable garden, covering containers, marginal things. But there you go. That's the reason they're white and like that. Let's see. And number 20 was a similar question about different types of protection covers. Okay. Somebody's worried that I'll decrease the amount of advice because I'm selling the Learn to Garden video series and the weekly garden planner. I don't think I've changed on the channel at all since I started selling those things. What those things are, though, is the Learn to Garden video series and the weekly garden planner are basically a consolidation. I have like 1,500 videos on this channel or more. So if you wanted to find a particular piece of information, it's easier. Those are basically organized spaces where you can learn the material in an organized way, and maybe understand my question and answer videos on Sunday a little better by having watched all those videos. But they're basically an organization of the channel. Less about me changing up what I'm doing anywhere else. But they're an opportunity where you can learn it all in a more compact, well-organized space than the channel is, because the channel is just all bouncing all over the place. The sun's about to be in my face here. And again, those Learn to Garden video series and the weekly garden planner are $50 off for the rest of the month. Number 22, Helene caused trees to fall, bringing full sun to small camellias. Should they move them, and when is it best? Holly, I moved a large camellia back at the old house. That's an easy searchable video on the channel if you want to learn how to move it. I had root pruned it in the fall, and then I moved it in March. So that'll answer the when of it. You can wait and see on camellias. Camellias are more sun tolerant than you think when they have some age on them. So you could wait through this next spring and summer, and if you're getting burn on it, if it seems stunted, if it doesn't seem happy, then you could move it next year. You could get away with that. Sun is not going to kill it this first year, but it could burn it, could, set it back a hair. So that I'm going to leave that up to you. But camellias are a little more adaptable, especially when they have some age on them, than you think. So if you wanted to wait a year and see what happens, do it. May require a little more watering, than it originally did to keep it fresh and happy. Holly, Come here. I hope you guys just saw her take off running. I mean, there you go. That's, you know, I get puppy for 5 minutes, and then, you know, 16-year-old dog for right after that. Let's see. So somebody's tractor seat plant, they're Farfugium. I actually have one that's back over here and one that's over there. This one got nuked to the ground. This one has not, because it's slightly more covered should they cut it back or leave it? I would just leave that foliage in place. It's kind of protecting the top of the plant. You know, they're in 8A Charlotte. Sometimes they come back from those, and sometimes they don't, from those really quick diebacks where they get just absolutely nuked to the ground. You know, it's an evergreen perennial that in zone 8 or 7 sometimes gets just completely liquefied to the ground really quickly. If they're a couple years old, they'll come back for sure. If there was the first year in the ground, it can be a little iffy. Looking right. Okay. Somebody's in zone 8B. They planted annuals or tender perennials in their area. Things that were only hardy in zone 10 or 11, and they're in zone 8B. They're looking rugged now and fading. At what point should they be removed, with plans to replant the same thing next year? That's actually content you're going to see this next week. I'm going to go ahead and pull out our annuals. We've left our annuals in the ground longer than we ever have this year. The Gomphrena, I don't know that I recognized how good of a seed source it was for the birds beyond it actually being frozen to the ground. So they've been frozen and killed. The plants have been frozen and killed, but those seed heads on those Gomphrena still have birds on them all day long. So I've left them and left them. I've noticed the birds dropping off this week. There are not any out there in the last couple of days, so I think that we'll go ahead and pull those out. But we're going to go ahead and pull out our annuals that have been nuked, and I'm probably, so here's the strategy. If you're not going to recompost them right now until you plant annuals again next year, I just cut them off at the base. That way you don't pull that soil up and disturb that soil and bring a bunch of weed seeds up that might germinate in the meantime. For me, I actually have some compost coming on Monday from Soil Cube, and I'm going to pull my annuals, and I'm going to go ahead and put down some compost over the top of it to kind of reseal it and not have weeds come up between now and then. So that would be the answer to how you would pull them out. But I would go ahead and pull them out whenever the birds are no longer taking advantage of it, and whenever it looks terrible, you can pull them or cut them, depending on when you're going to prep the space for next year's annuals. Okay, let's see. So I think that's actually it for this week. So thank you guys so much for participating. Ask gardening questions down below this video in the comment section, and we'll pick from those next week as well. It's like 28 degrees out here. I don't know if I've looked like I'm cold the whole time, but my hands are definitely cold at this point. So thank you guys so much for participating.